So good evening, afternoon, morning, whatever it is with you. The back of my chair is snapped off. So watch me go when I don't think about it. So, thanks for all the nice comments and the views on my driver's hours video. I was really pleased with that. It turned out more successful than I had hoped. And it wasn't quite as boring as I expected. You see, I talked about ADHD in the last one and problems with it. And it drove me mad because I kept moving stuff around the desk. That is infuriating, but that is a bit of an ADHD thing. So I'm doing it now, even while I'm talking about being infuriated. So, we are now, you see, no, I can't help myself. Literally, I just pick stuff up and put it down on the same place on the desk. Pick that up, and put it down, pick that up, put it down. It's like I can't help it. It's interesting, actually. ADHD is fascinating. Because it's your brain is literally wired differently. It's like you are abnormal. Let's face it, you've all realised I've been abnormal for many years. And pick up that, put that down over there, put that up over there. So maybe I should get news on the job. That doesn't seem to have happened either. Why am I unemployable as a van driver? It was a good job too. I really liked the sound of it. It was for Green Corps, delivering to shops like sandwiches and stuff, and it was stretching from all the way over in Newport in the east to the sea in the west, and the runs looked really interesting, but they don't want me, so I'm going to probably do some crowdfunding and set myself up as a CPC trainer. I was going to do that anyway, but I wanted to be in work first so I could save the money up and sort it out, but to join a consortium and stuff and whatnot and get the materials and write my own is going to cost like probably at least 1,500 quid. So I might crowdfund that and make people who crowdfund it own part of the lorrydriver.com business, which is because it's going to become a business. It's like 40% supporters and 60% me. But still thought, stop touching things, Luke, stop touching things, Luke, stop touching things. Right, so axles, somebody requested this. Let's put that up a little bit. Requested this on somewhere the other day. If you've got a suggestion, if there's a subject you want to learn about, I'm going to cover them all eventually. But as I said the other day, I found out I really enjoy it, writing it and presenting it. Because I've noticed they're still doing online CPC courses via Zoom, streaming, which that would be right up my street, of course. So, latest video. Axle configurations and anything to do with them. Welcome to my latest top tips. After a couple of emails, I'm going to read this one, asking for them. This is a video about weights, axle weights, load distribution, how to load, the different driving dynamics depending on the format, and the way out of any problems you may encounter. There's a lot, the different setups can act radically different from each other. For instance, lift axles will behave differently when they're up to when they're down, obviously. And a mid-lift is a very different thing in terms of dynamics to a 4x2 or a tag axle or anything like that. So like they look the same truck-wise, but they're radically different and they all require different approaches. So wheel configurations are described using 4x2, 6x2. The first number is the amount of wheels, 4 or 6. Twin wheels count as 1. The second is how many are driven. So a 4x2 is 4-wheel unit with 2 wheels driven. Again, double wheels are counted as 1 single. But to complicate the issue, I mean, who would have ever thought maybe complicated? Arctics, when, hang on, I'm getting there, my brain's cranking over. Oh yeah, to complicate the issue, I'm getting confused by complications. When talking about trailers, it changes to axles, not wheels. So a 3 plus 3. So 4x2, X in the middle. 3 plus 3, plus in the middle, is a 6-wheel unit and a triaxle trailer. A 2 plus 3, 2 axle unit, 3 plus. But it's rarely used. Most people describe Arctics and drawbars as the number of axles, so like 6 axle Arctic, 5 axle Arctic, 5 axle drawbar, that sort of thing. That's what's most commonly used. yeah, so as I say, twin wheels are most considered one wheel for most purposes. Trailers all used to be twin. If you're a young driver and you're fairly new to the industry, trailers used to be all twin wheels once upon a time, before the super single took over. You can have super singles on the front or on the lift axle, but it's just aesthetics. They just look better, in my opinion, and some people don't like them. But back when the super single first came out and they started putting them on trailers, a few people put super single trailer tires on the front axle, the steering axle, which gave you, in the wet, about as much grip as a grandmother on ice skates. They were quite fucking terrifying to drive because they just didn't have, because being a trailer tire is a very different design to a steer tire and so on and so forth. There's not really any benefits to having a super single on the front. And it can actually get annoying sometimes. So if you're in a heavily rutted road, you've got the front wheels like bouncing over the edges of the rut. Whereas if you've got a like normal wheel, you just sit in it and take your hands off the steering wheel, cook a pork chop, eat some dinner, go and have a sleep. Yes. Super singles on the driver now, I think, but not in the UK. I've not seen it in the UK yet, but in America they're becoming common. Really wide and fat. There's advantages to it. I mean, being able to having to get one tire and take one wheel off is better than two, and so on and so forth. Gross weight and train weight. Why do I burp? One eye video. GVW, GTW. Gross weight is the weight of the unit or the rigid. Train weight is the total weight of a vehicle plus a trailer. So you'd only ever talk about gross weight, say for an 18-ton rigid or 24-ton rigid or whatever 36-ton 8-wheeler. But when it comes to Arctics and drawbars, you would talk about the maximum weight would be the gross train weight, which is the weight of the whole combination. But like the other one, what was it? Oh yeah, like plus the actual description, it's not actually used that commonly. Train weight is, a lot of drivers don't even know it. Yeah, so it's just like 44-ton Arctic, that sort of thing. Yes, which is just as it implies train weight. Lift axles come in various positions. A mid-lift on a tractor unit is the middle axle. Who'd have thought today? Steered or not. Steered ones used to be really common. They used to be called twin steers. Remember the old DAF 3600 and stuff that used to sit up at the front? Because Dad had one, 2800. And they always sat up at the front when they had twin steers because they used to steer. But that sort of faded away. You still get a few of them steer, but a lot of them don't anymore. And you don't really hear the words twin steer used at all anymore. Not heard it in a long time. And the trailer, axles on a trailer are described, the whole lot is like a bogie, like on a train bogie, trailer bogie. So positives to mid-lift, smoother ride. That's the main thing. And not apart from that and weight, being able to carry more weight, of course, and the positive, but I'm talking from a driver's point of view, and the positive to a tag are much tighter turning circle and better off-road. Tags will go around but they are a bit rougher and they bounce around a bit. You most often see tags on trucks that go off-road. Nowadays, most lift axles are automatic. Yeah, so you'll have a switch on the dash, press it down, and I can just leave it on basically, and it'll go up and down of its own accord, depending on the weight. So it won't come down if it's nowadays, because once upon a time you could get them up and they'd stay up, but then load sensors came in, and you can't lift a lift axle now generally, unless you found some way around it. Once upon a time, road tax was based on axles, and you couldn't have a lift axle up even if you only had like one pallet on, any load on, and you had to have all the wheels down. But nowadays it's not that way. Trailers, different. Some are automatic, but most, in my experience, although I've not driven one for a couple of years, but is you need to pull a valve on the chassis of the trailer. So like it's the same as the often the same as the trailer park valve, and often next to it, but sometimes the very little small ones. pop them out and trailer goes up. And again, like the unit, often the trailer axle won't go up if there's a weight on it, well, a lot of weight on it. Also, lifting the front axle on a trailer, especially if you're loaded, will give you more traction because it puts more weight on the unit. On a 6-wheel unit, you can get a non-driven axle to lift temporarily to aid traction. So if you're in a sticky patch, most commonly, this is the way I've seen it done, is hold the switch down, and the axle will lift, but you got to hold it down. Most trucks, it limits the speed to a crawl, and some, it just dumps the air, so the axle won't actually lift. It will just take the weight off the axle and just dumps the air. But you actually have to hold the switch in with a lot of them. And like I say, traction's another pro for tags. And why you'll see many tippers ejectors have tags, as it can impose more weight as it's further back. Mid lifts are not very good when you get slippy. Yes, they can be a bit of a nightmare. This video is going to be so long. I'm only 2 pages into 8 pages. Yeah, in my experience, I'm amazed how many drivers seem not to know the basics about load distribution, and how knowing the ins and outs can help you do your job, from weight to traction to maneuverability. This may be because if you only ever deal in full loads, you don't have to think about it. Like if you pick up a load, if it's always full loads, like there's no reason for you to know anything about load distribution generally. But if you do multi drops and stuff, or part loads, I mean, it can be possible to be overweight on an axle with like a couple of pallets on and stuff. It's all about where you place these things. I mean, a 1-ton pallet sat at the very front on the headboard, especially on a fridge, will actually impose more weight on the fifth wheel than sometimes the pallet weighs, because it's extra force, because it's over. You know, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm looking for a word there. Because it's forward, so like it's heavier. And it's the same with the rear. Alright, so in front of the kingpin, anything, the further you go in front of the kingpin, the more weight it'll put on the kingpin. And likewise, a 1-ton pallet on the very rear of an empty Arctic will lift weight off your unit and make for a very entertaining driving experience if you've ever done that. That can be a bit frightening, especially in the wet, because due to the overhang, it takes so much weight off the drive axle if you've got a couple of pallets right on the back doors. So, but if you're doing multi-drop and you've got heavy pallets, the best place is to put them over the bogies or whatnot. A truck with lifting axles will behave differently when they're up to when they're down. Basically, it's pivot points. So, where's my... Oh, there it is. Hello. I got a Virginia one on my 750. I gave it to Sam when I first got it, because my brother, and now it's got pride of a place in his house, and I'm never going to get it back, which is fine. So, ISF, as they say in Dutch, pivot points. So when all the axles are down, it pivots around the middle axle in the middle, up, down like that, but also spinning around like that. So that's your cut-in. If you raise the front axle, you have to be careful because it gets even more cut-in on the trailer. So it always pivots around the center point of the center axle of a set of bogie and stuff. And like I say, you just got to be careful of pivot points. If you manage to lift the front axle, it cuts in more. And if you lift the back axle on some trailers, your overhang becomes enormous. It wasn't always never a massive problem with me because I'm actually a magnificent driver. He says, not having a license because he crashed. No, because I started out on coaches, and coaches do have enormous overhangs. Yes. Okay, I've said that. Oh, in Holland, they have some trailers, I'm talking of Holland, where those two lift so the driving dynamics stay exactly the same because it still pivots around the same point, and it's a really good idea. And I'm sure I read somewhere that it's not quite legal in the UK, but I don't know. Tire scrub. There we go. That's one. People have such a like. They just don't think about tire scrub. It's like mad. Don't make tight turns if not necessary. If you need to turn your lorry around, make it the widest turn you possibly can, taking into account damage and stuff. You don't want to, like, I'm not saying drive into a building to get around a wide turn, but turning an Arctic really tightly, like that, scrubs. Because if you watch the axles on the trailer, if you look in the mirror or watch one turning around super tightly, you'll see the axles actually start going backwards at one point. The trailer goes backwards at a point and then turns around, and they scrub the tires to living fuck. And not to mention your airlines, because covered in grease and stretched to breaking point and sometimes beyond. So yeah, I always take the widest approach. Also, thinking of airlines, when you're pulling curtain side, do it up properly. This is really important, especially if you do tight turns. Have the bottom of the curtain, as it's designed to do, cover over the end of the handle. Badly stowed curtain handles have demolished many an airline, mine included. We're like, anybody who's been driving it for a curtain side for any length of time will probably have had an airline wrap around the curtain side handle and whip it away. So there's two ways in which you can arslick the boss, saying, I don't turn tightly because I'm conscious of your tires, dear sir, and I've not removed an airline in weeks. So this is what the point of this video was. Waits road-friendly suspension, which is in the legislation, is a nonsense PR term. I think it was the 90s it came about. They invented it, basically, road-friendly suspension. As a justification for claiming to the public, for saying, well, they won't cause any more damage on the road as they have road-friendly suspension. It's basically air suspension. Very little isn't air suspended in these days, and what isn't is the off-road stuff, and they're mostly on rubber. Also, just to quickly note, sometimes you see trucks that are really low on photographs, like the blinged up trucks. A lot of people don't realise this, but because you get people saying, that won't be able to go over a speed bump, it's because it's got air on the front. Air on the front is really rare, actually. I've only ever driven 1 or 2 lorries in my whole life with air on the front. I don't know why it's rare, although it's not necessarily needed either. It doesn't, like, provides a slightly smoother ride, but it's quite good, basically, just to sit the lorry down for photographs. That's all. That's the only benefit I could see. So, yes. So also, just to note, the definitive answer for weights is on the truck plate. Some trucks are downrated for different reasons, whatever. So, if you want the absolute answer, look at the plate. The plate, which I will put an example of here, is normally on the passenger side step. Pop, breathe it down. It's got a little seal on it. Also, check the seal's intact. It's just like a little, just if you pull it off, you have to break the seal. Or it's under the front. But most commonly, I think, in British trucks, it is not. By the step. So rigids, a 2-axle rigid with spring suspension, 17 tons, with road-friendly suspension, 18. 3-axle is 25 and 26 tons. A 4-axle is 30 and 32 tons. Arctics, a 3-axle Arctic, so like a single-axle trailer and a 2-axle Arctic, is 25 and 26 tons. A 4-axle Arctic, which is a 4-wheeler and a tandem trailer, or you could have a 6-wheel unit and a single trailer. 4-axle, 36 and 38. That's quite a lot. 5-axle, 38 and 40, and 6-axle, which most people drive now, is 44 tons. Just to say that in Europe, most of Europe runs basically around 40 tons on 5 axles. This is why you very rare, 6-wheelers are a bit of a UK obsession, for obvious reasons, because they can carry more. But most of Europe, that isn't the case. So if you ever see foreign lorries over here, they're almost certainly 4-wheelers. With HSF, we used to have 6, despite them being Dutch. But that was because HSF lorries used to have an enormous amount of weight put on them. When I think back now to the stuff I put in an HSF lorry and the weight I was, it's insane. I think the heaviest I was ever, I can't remember if it was HSF or Nolan's, 56 tons once, I think it was it 55 or 56? Oh dear. Oh, and also just to note, myths wise, the whole hanging meat and loaded with steel underneath is absolute bollocks. You sometimes hear people still say that. Oh, I met an Irishman who had a load of hanging meat on with steel on the floor. One, what? How do you get it in there? Slide it in. Two, most hanging touches the floor, just about. And three, no meat factory abattoir is going to load a truck with a load of steel on the floor. So that dispels that stupid myth. Drawbars, 4-axle 36 tons, 5-axle 40 tons, 6-axle 44 tons. Next page. So now for axle limits. Like I say, if you do multi-drop, you need to be careful with axle limits because sometimes you can put yourself over very, very easily with a very, very little weight on the lorry. So you can have like a few pallets on, but be overweight on an axle. 11.5 tons for a single driven axle. 10 tons for a sole non-driven axle. So say the middle axle of a unit or whatnot. 19 tons for twin driven. 20 tons for twin non-driven. I don't know why the weight's lower for the driven because it would actually have more weight anyway. And 24 tons on a track, so like at the bogie on the back of a trailer. As mentioned above, traction varies radically from vehicle to vehicle. Tags are usually the best when lifted, traction-wise. 4x2s are pretty good. And a 6x2 mid-lift could get stuck in a puddle. 6x4 trucks are fairly few and far between and mostly on specialist operations like tippers and waste heavy haulage. So you're stuck, what do you do? Here we go, we've got a funny story here. I'm going to entertain you with a funny story. In my brief time as a transport manager in the UK for Virginia, a job which I was singly unsuited for, now knowing I've got ADHD, I got a call from Ray, the boss. Oh, there's a driver stuck. I think it was Milton Keynes. Milton Keynes, can you go ahead, get in the van and go down and see what you can do? So that's what I did. Jumped in the van and off I went at high speed. So a couple of hours there, I get there. And I was almost left literally speechless by what he had done. I'm going to read this out because he had unloaded his curtain side. That was a curtain side, so it was empty. And instead of turning around on the mostly concrete yard, he decided, in his infinite wisdom, to use a patch of mud and grass covered in puddles. Like, it left me absolutely speechless when I got there. By the time I'd got there, he'd been trying to get out for 3 hours. And somehow, again for some inexplicable reason, he decided the answer was to drop the trailer in the mud. God only knows how he did it. He obviously had enough traction to get out from under the trailer, but not go any further. So I was presented with a unit and a trailer stuck separately 6 feet apart, and a bloke from the delivery looking like a murder was about to occur. Oh God, it gets worse, absolutely worse. So I got in the lorry and I was, again, this time it did actually leave me speechless. He was empty, stuck on this patch of mud, spent 3 hours trying to get out, managed to drop the trailer somehow. All the while, he had the middle axle down and the diff lock was switched off. Oh my God. So I was left thinking, how are people this fucking stupid? And he didn't even have the argument that he was a new driver, a young driver. He was like older than me, middle-aged bloke. Oh my God. But an hour later, covered in mud, and I was exhausted, I handed his truck and trailer, all hitched up, back to him on the concrete. And he went on his way. as I say here, to this day, I'm not entirely sure how I managed to get out of that sticky patch because I thought it was going to need recovery, but being the superhero driver I am, it didn't. So you're stuck. If you're new, here's a brief rundown of what to do. One thing my dad taught me from the very, very start, and one thing I've always, it's like there's a very few cardinal rules for driving a truck. And one of them, one of the biggest, never, ever, ever drive an Arctic onto soft ground. It's just not worth it, because you would be amazed how quickly they sink and how fast you will get stuck. That's all there is to it. Even 6x4s that I used to drive for London Waste, you'd be surprised how easily they can get stuck on a landfill. So if you've got something that's not built for it, especially if you've got the middle axle down, diff locks off, yeah. But driving an Arctic off-road, if it's part of your job, like I say with landfill, London Waste, it's great fun. Charging around. Was it Bedworth tip? Not Bedworth. Brogba. Up the M1. Flooring it like it was. I remember one we started tipping in Hertford tip, I think. Was it? Or somewhere. And there's like down slope and back up the other side. And it was entirely a sheet of mud. And the idea was to floor it down. Oh God, come on, come on, come on. You couldn't make it up the other side, almost never got up the other side, nearly always needed the bulldozer to come and tow you around. Oh, and this is another tip. If you ever do need a tow out, don't stand anywhere near the fucking rope or chain. Because if that snaps and you're in its snapping space, it will decapitate you. I had one snap on the tip once and it flew within like a foot of me. To this day, I can still hear the sound of it. If I'd have been stood a foot further forward, I'd at the very least probably have no legs. So yeah, I see so many people so often not giving it due respect and not being safe in that respect. So yeah, there we go. If you're stuck, lift as many axles as possible. And like I say, with the unit one, sometimes we're holding the switch down if you're loaded. You want maximum weight. Everything you can get onto the drive axle, you want. Which includes lifting the front trailer axle, but not the rear. If you do have a rear trailer lifting axle, don't lift it, because like I say, that will just take weight off the unit pivot points. If auto, which most trucks are nowadays, just pop it in manual. You'll hear so many moan about autos getting stuck, but having a manual box isn't some magic traction boost. Held in first gear or second gear, you have just as much control with an auto as you do with a manual. All it is in an auto, especially nowadays because they're really advanced, your clutch is moved from the clutch pedal to the accelerator. There's so much control with the accelerator. That's where people fall down, is because they think without the clutch it's on or off, but it's not. It's very delicate. Like, you can be really delicate and whatnot with an auto. And diff lock. Engage the diff lock. If you're new to this without much mechanical knowledge, basically the axles are geared so each wheel can move independently of the other. This is called the diff or differential. And it's what's in the large round piece of the middle of the axle. Each wheel moves a different amount on tarmac, like when you're going around bends and stuff, and tight turns and whatnot. So that's why the differential is there, to allow them to move differently. This means, though, when you've lost traction, one or both of the wheels can spin because they don't work together. So, as the name suggests, the diff lock locks the diff, which gives you equal power to both wheels constantly. It can make absolutely be the difference between getting in and out. I'll put a diff lock symbol here. It'll be on the dash. So you've got free. Yay, I can drive away. Stop. No, 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 no. Always make sure, once you're on solid ground, turn the diff lock off. Left on the tarmac, it can cause, depending on how long it's on, a lot of damage, because it winds everything up, because the wheels on the ground do move a different distance to each other. You just wind it up until something goes bang, like half shaft or prop shaft, or your diff just explodes. So yeah, be careful to switch it off. Also, if you need a tow, use a towing point on the front of the lorry. Only use the towing point. If you look in the locker, there's normally a towing thing there, like on Volvos. You just pull a flap off and slide it in and turn it around. On all trucks, actually. Always only use that. I've seen them wrapped around bumpers, around axles, around landing legs, and rear underrun bars. And any of those, you are almost certainly going to cause damage on the backs of trailers. Most trailers actually have hooks, so you can strap them down on ferry and stuff. Use those, and if possible, if the trailer hasn't got a high towing point, and if possible, from both. So, but only use those hooks. Don't put it at the end of the bottom of the underrun bar, because they are designed to crumple in an impact, so they aren't actually that strong, and they're certainly not strong enough to pull out a blooming stuck lorry. Oh, here we go. So another point that fits in with axle configurations: steer axles on trailers. There are two types: the passive type, which is the rear axle, and it just follows, basically. It just turns as the trailer turns. And you don't really need to do anything with that. You don't need to do anything with either of them. And the positive rear steers, which a lot of supermarkets use and stuff on their little four-wheel trailers, that's where a chock goes into the fifth wheel and is mechanically steered, normally with cables. You don't need to do anything. The chock's just automatic. The latter, that's best. Those positively steered ones are really, really good. Don't be intimidated by them, by any of them. Just approach them with an open mind, willing to learn. They are designed there to make your life easier, not harder. They're not designed to catch you out. And once you get into driving with rear steers, it makes the job a lot easier in very tight places and stuff. With the passive rear steers, though, which is mostly the back axle on a triaxle trailer, you need to make sure that you lock it to reverse. I've seen so many drivers not lock it, and they're forcing it back, and the wheels heave, scrubbing the wheels to death. Basically, there'll be a valve on the chassis somewhere. Drive forward in a dead straight line, pull the valve, it locks the axle, and you reverse as normally, because it's just a normal triaxle then. With a positive rear steer, you don't need to pull anything, because they just turn on anyway. And just reverse as normal. Again, it takes a little bit of practice, but they are really, really, really good once you get into the swing of it. All you need to remember is they turn much faster, so you can get into much tighter gaps and stuff. That's why the supermarket use them, which can catch you out at first. But once you get into them, they're brilliant to use. And because the trailer follows the unit much more, they are much better for cutting. So you can drive much tighter to things, he says, waving around. So I think that covers everything. I'm going to now mull over this pile of nonsense for a little bit and maybe put it out soon. If anything else transport related, please let me know. Email luke@lorrydriver.com. I'm here to advise, and like I say, I'm going to set up maybe a crowdfunder for becoming a CPC trainer, because what I might do with that is basically just money up front for CPC courses. What I'm going to do, what the plan is to do, is I'm going to hold CPC courses all over the country, because all you need to do is hire a meeting room and stuff. So that's what I want to do, so you don't have to come all the way to West Wales. So we shall see. I'm doing it again. I'm doing it again. Stop it, Luke. Stop it. I'm going downstairs. I want to eat some chicken. Good day.